I am Eleanor, and every day I witness the silent suffering of elderly people who enter the hospital expecting care but are treated with disregard simply because they don't have financial means. I see it, I feel it, and I am moved by this reality. They are not seen as people, but as numbers. Today, I will tell the story of one of these elderly individuals, someone who, like so many others, has been forgotten by the system, but whose pain cannot be ignored. The chill of the Manchester air was nothing compared to the cold reception inside. I collapsed through those automatic doors, my chest tightening, convinced I was facing the final curtain. But the waiting room wasn't a sanctuary. It was a fortress guarded by protocol. They saw a body failing, yet demanded a piece of paper. A simple, forgotten slip of identification stood between a desperate plea and basic human decency. What price does a life hold when stacked against misplaced bureaucracy? The truth, I learned, is far higher than anyone imagines. The cold Manchester air clung to my threadbare tweed coat as I stumbled through the automatic doors of St. Jude's Metropolitan Hospital on October 17, 2023. My head was swimming, a dizzying fog that had descended moments after I tried to navigate the stairs in my small tenement flat in the Northern Quarter. Every step was a monumental effort, each breath a shallow, rattling affair. I approached Triage Desk Delta, a sterile, brightly lit station that seemed designed to repel rather than welcome the afflicted. Behind the counter sat receptionist Jillian Hayes, of 30 years, her face a mask of weary efficiency, punctuated by the overly bright hue of her lanyard swinging against the beige partition. She looked up, her expression barely shifting from fatigue to mild annoyance as she registered my presence, my slightly disheveled appearance, and the obvious tremor in my hands. "Next, please," Jillian Hayes said, her voice flat, professional, and utterly devoid of empathy. I leaned heavily on the edge of the counter, fighting to keep my thoughts tethered. "Please," I managed, the word catching in my throat. "I need immediate assistance. I'm Arthur Pendleton, 78 years old. I felt a sudden, sharp pain in my chest, and now I can barely stand." The word protocol hit me like a physical blow, momentarily clearing the fog of sickness with a sharp jolt of indignant clarity. "Proof? I haven't got it. It was lost during the move last week. My driving license, it's gone." I fumbled with my leather wallet worn, an object that contained more ghosts of past utility than actual currency or current documentation. I showed her the few crumpled receipts and the paltry sum of cash. No plastic card, no current address, certainly no photograph to satisfy the bureaucratic machine. "But I am clearly unwell," I pleaded, my voice cracking. My fragile build felt suddenly brittle under the harsh fluorescent lighting. My deep-set, weary eyes pleaded with her, but she merely tapped a pen against a page in the hospital protocol manual sitting open before her. "I understand your distress, sir," she recited, her tone maddeningly rehearsed. "But there are strict guidelines. Can you provide an alternative? A utility bill with your name and current address? A passport?" "It's all gone," I told you. "My health is failing, and you're worried about the color of my identification card?" The indignation was rising, warring with the encroaching nausea. I was Arthur Pendleton, 78, and I was being denied basic medical attention because of a piece of laminated plastic. Just then, Nurse Eleanor Vance, of 40 years, swept into the area from the direction of the main corridor. Her impeccably neat uniform seemed a deliberate contrast to my own increasingly damp and crumpled appearance. "Jillian, what is the holdup here?" Nurse Vance asked, her tone sharp, not unkind, but decidedly focused on throughput. Nurse Vance assessed me, not my symptoms, but my presentation. She took in the threadbare coat, the tremor, the general air of genteel poverty clinging to me, and her professionalism hardened into a clinical barrier. I see, Mr. Pendleton. We cannot admit unregistered patients into the acute pathway. The risk management implications are too great. She leaned in conspiratorially, as if sharing a regrettable truth. If you can find someone, a neighbor, a relative, who can vouch for you and bring in necessary identification, we can process you immediately upon their arrival. Otherwise, you'll have to wait in the general holding area until an administrator can conduct a full manual verification, which, frankly, could take hours. Hours for a man whose breath was already failing. I could feel the cold dread crystallizing in my chest, more profound than the physical pain. This was the systemic desensitization in action. The paperwork was the gatekeeper, and I, Arthur Pendleton, was too poor, too unlucky to have the required key. "There is no one," I whispered, the fight draining out of me. "I live alone. I haven't much contact these days." Nurse Vance offered a brief, tight nod. "Then A&E Bay 4, please. Report to the triage nurse there. They will log your situation, but I must stress treatment priority will be determined by the administrative status." She turned away before I could argue further, leaving Jillian A's to merely point vaguely toward a dimly lit corridor leading deeper into the department. The journey to A&E Waiting Bay 4 was a blur of institutional beige and echoing noises. When I finally reached the area, it was overwhelmingly crowded, a purgatory of uncomfortable seating, low lighting, and the shared misery of others. I sank onto a plastic chair, immediately feeling the cold seep through my thin trousers. Time distorted. Minutes became epochs. My original chest pain had morphed into a dull, relentless ache, accompanied by a frightening shortness of breath. I tried to catch the eye of the few staff members patrolling the area, but they moved with a singular focus, their eyes scanning only charts, never faces. It was perhaps 3 hours later, though it felt like a geological age, that Dr. Alistair Finch, of 50 years, finally approached my bay. He possessed a distinguished appearance, his silver-streaked, slightly receding hairline lending him an air of unassailable authority. He held a tablet, not a stethoscope initially. "Pendleton, I am Dr. Finch. I'm reviewing your notes from Triage Delta." He paused, frowning slightly at the tablet screen. "It states here you have an administrative hold pending verification. What is the issue regarding your registration?" Dr. Finch's initial reaction was detached, professional authority. "Yes, I understand the predicament. Administrative protocol is non-negotiable, Mr. Pendleton." However, he tapped the screen again, a momentary flicker of guarded concern crossing his features. "Your initial vital signs taken by the desk nurse, which I must say were taken late, only after the administrative query was logged, are concerning. They suggest a potentially serious cardiac event." This was the moment, the critical juncture where the system, having successfully stalled me for half a day, now faced the consequences of its own inertia. My breathing seized momentarily. A deep, burning cramp shot through my left arm. I gasped, clutching my chest instinctively, the raw fear finally overriding the indignation. "Doctor, please," I choked out, the dignity completely abandoned. "I can't breathe. Help me now. The paperwork can wait. I'm paying the price for a lost piece of plastic with my life." Finch watched me, his detached posture finally crumbling. He saw the genuine panic, the physical evidence of deterioration that no administrative form could obscure. He snapped his head up toward a passing nurse, his authoritative voice cutting through the relative quiet of the bay. The sudden, aggressive shift in tone was jarring, a clear admission that only imminent collapse could force the system to acknowledge my humanity. As strong hands finally lifted me from the uncomfortable seat, moving me towards the real medical attention I should have received hours earlier, I looked back at the Bay 4 seating area. I saw not just myself, but the countless elderly, the visibly poor, those whose misfortune was written plainly on their worn clothes, all queuing for a bureaucratic mercy that arrived only when neglect became legally indefensible. The sterile veneer of St. Jude's had cracked, revealing the cruel calculus beneath. My life's value, for half a day, had been determined by what I could not prove I was. That was the price of a lost driving license in Manchester. The rush that followed Alastair's sharp command was disorienting. I was suddenly no longer Arthur Pendleton, the bureaucratic inconvenience, but Arthur Pendleton, the patient requiring immediate intervention. The transition, though physically relieving, felt profoundly insulting. It confirmed every bitter suspicion. My suffering was only legitimate when it threatened immediate litigation or catastrophic immediate failure on the hospital's part. As they wheeled me swiftly away from Bay 4, the stale air of the waiting area seemed to dissolve, replaced by the sharp, metallic scent of the resuscitation bay. Eleanor was there, her initial rigidity melting into sharp, focused activity. She efficiently monitored the leads being attached to my chest, her brow furrowed in concentration. Jillian was right to flag the delay, but Alastair is correct to push this now, Eleanor muttered to a passing junior doctor, her words intended for my ears as much as anyone else's. Mr. Pendleton, we are getting you seen. Try to stay as still as possible. I could only nod, my chest tight, the pain now a deep, grinding pressure that made coherent thought a Herculean task. The irony was a bitter pill. I had fought for hours for the very attention that was now being administered in a frantic panic. The system, it seemed, possessed a terrible inertia, yet could pivot on a dime when cornered by the threat of legal exposure. Alastair stood over me, his earlier detachment replaced by the tense focus of a surgeon about to make a critical incision. He scrutinized the readings flashing on the monitor. The triage delta log showed a near-normal rhythm just 3 hours ago. This deterioration is rapid. Eleanor, can you confirm the timeline again? When exactly did he first present? Alastair let out a low, disgusted sound. Almost 4 hours of potential critical time lost, purely over paperwork. 4 hours, Eleanor. A gentleman of 78, frail, clearly distressed, left to navigate a labyrinth designed for the hale and the digitally equipped. He looked down at me, and for the first time, I saw genuine self-reproach flicker in his authoritative eyes. Pendleton, I cannot apologize enough for the process you were forced to endure. This is unacceptable negligence. But his apology, however heartfelt, did little to ease the actual physical trauma. The critical moment arrived when the monitoring machine emitted a piercing, continuous alarm. My heart lurched violently, the pain flaring from a deep ache to an all-consuming, blinding agony. I saw Eleanor and Alastair exchange a look, the look that confirms the worst is imminent. He's fibrillating. Get the paddles charged, Alastair barked. The world tilted. The bright lights of the resuscitation bay seemed to spin into an indistinct blur. The sounds of the room, the urgent shouts, the rhythmic beeping, the crackle of the charging paddles became muffled, distant, as if heard underwater. This was the true cost of the lost driving license, the ultimate reckoning for a system prioritizing compliance over compassion. I felt the sharp, searing shock of the defibrillator as they administered the charge, a violent jolt intended to restart the engine of my failing body. When consciousness grudgingly returned, it was slow, painful, and filled with a metallic taste. I was breathing, raggedly, but breathing. Alastair was leaning over me, wiping sweat from his own brow. "You gave us a fright, Arthur," he said, using my first name, a sign of the boundary crossed in crisis. "We managed to stabilize the rhythm. You've suffered significant cardiac damage, but you pulled through. You're on the critical care unit now." Handled. The word mocked me. The bureaucracy had nearly killed me, and only a near-fatal cardiac event forced its reluctant hand to be handled. I was alive, yes, but the fragility of my existence had been laid bare. I had experienced firsthand the chilling reality that in the cold, structured world of St. Jude's, an elderly man without proof of his existence, his address, his past, his very identity, was deemed less worthy of immediate succor than the protocol enshrined in that damning manual. The sterile quiet of the critical care unit was deceptive. It suggested healing, control, a system finally functioning optimally. But I, Arthur, felt only a profound, hollow exhaustion. The pain had receded, replaced by a dull throb that mirrored the dull throb of injustice in my mind. Alistair and Eleanor hovered at the periphery of my awareness, their voices low, professional murmurs mixing with the steady rhythm of the machines keeping me tethered to life. "Arthur," he began, his tone measured, devoid of the earlier, almost panicked authority. "The immediate danger has passed. We are running diagnostics now. The team is performing exceptionally well given the circumstances, but we need to address the administrative fallout." I managed a weak nod, my throat dry. "Fallout," I echoed, the word tasting like ash. "That's what it is then. Not accountability, just fallout to be swept away."
"Jillian," I repeated, a flicker of cold anger overriding the medication haze. I remember the receptionist at Triage Delta, her bright lanyard seeming to mock my gray, worn coat. Jillian Hayes, she was the gatekeeper, wasn't she? The one who decided that my body collapsing in public was less urgent than her need to see a laminated photo card? Alistair sighed, running a hand over his slightly receding hair. "Jillian was following policy, Arthur. It is frustrating, but the hospital must adhere to strict guidelines regarding patient verification, especially concerning billing and safeguarding." Safeguarding? I felt the indignation rising again, forcing a small, sharp cough. What safeguarding was there in leaving a man near collapse in Bay 4 for nearly 4 hours? That wasn't safeguarding, Alistair. That was institutional lethargy thinly veiled as procedure. I saw the way she looked at me, at my shoes, at the slight fraying of my coat cuff. She didn't see a patient. She saw someone whose paperwork was unlikely to be pristine. The emotional confrontation, though quiet, was clearly draining. Alistair looked genuinely pained, which only confirmed my deepest suspicion. The empathy exists, but it is heavily subsidized by fear of institutional repercussions. "I understand your anger, Arthur," Alistair conceded. "And trust me, your case will be reviewed with the departmental heads. We are implementing a temporary override for critical presentation, though frankly, it should never have needed this near disaster to trigger that review." I closed my eyes, focusing on the steady beep of the heart monitor. My mind drifted back to the sheer panic in Bay 4, the way the fluorescent light seemed to hum with hostile energy, and the almost casual dismissal from the staff moving briskly past me, their own identities secure, their protocols clear. My lost driving license, the item that connected me to my bank, my history, the very fabric of bureaucratic recognition, had become a death warrant. The memory sharpened into a specific, agonizing moment. A junior nurse passing Bay 4, perhaps just before Alistair's intervention, glancing in, noting my shallow breathing, and then speeding up, checking her watch, clearly adhering to the instruction to focus only on those patients whose administrative status was green. It wasn't malice. It was the chilling efficiency of a system that rewards adherence above all else. "I need to speak to Mark," I stated firmly, opening my eyes. "The social worker. I need to ensure this isn't just brushed under the carpet with an internal memo about process review. I need action. I paid a price for that lost piece of plastic that no one in this clean, bright room can truly comprehend." Eleanor looked at Alistair, a brief, nonverbal consultation passing between them. Eleanor, I noted, seemed marginally more human now that the immediate threat of litigation had subsided. Perhaps seeing an elderly man almost flatline over administrative sloth had finally pierced her shield of professional detachment. Mark is waiting, Eleanor confirmed. He's bringing documentation from the council, old voter registrations, pension confirmation, anything to establish identity without requiring the photo card. He is prepared to stay with you until this is fully resolved, including assisting you with reporting the loss officially once you are stable enough. The sheer exhaustion was a heavy cloak. I knew intrinsically that Mark, the social worker, was a good man, probably overworked and under-resourced, attempting to patch holes in a dam built of crumbling paperwork and administrative rigidity. But I was too weary to fight the paperwork battle any further today. The fight had cost me 4 hours of my life and nearly the rest of my heart. "Tell Mark to bring coffee," I managed, managing a ghost of a smile, though it felt more like a grimace. The instant kind. And perhaps, I looked pointedly at Alistair, ensuring my voice carried a thread of my old indignation. "Tell him to bring a copy of that protocol manual from Triage Delta." I find myself suddenly curious about the precise chapter and verse that justifies letting an elderly man effectively die of administrative oversight in a Manchester General Hospital. Alistair nodded slowly, absorbing the full weight of the indictment. He straightened up, signaling to Eleanor to monitor my vitals closely.
"We will ensure you have what you need, Arthur," Alistair promised, his voice resonating with a seriousness that felt earned, though desperately overdue. "The focus now is recovery, but your testimony, that will not be forgotten, not by me." He left the room with Eleanor following close behind, leaving me alone with the quiet beeping machinery and the stark realization of my own profound vulnerability. I was safe for the moment, patched up by rushed expertise reacting to a near tragedy. But the cold indifference I had faced, the stark message that without the right piece of laminated card, I was nobody, unserviceable, disposable, that remained, sharp and painfully real, the true scar of the day. The fight for dignity in the face of bureaucracy was a battle I'd only narrowly survived, and I knew, even beneath the calming influence of the drugs, that the true war against being rendered invisible had only just paused. Smash that subscribe button and hit the like if you enjoyed this.